Shabbat Shalom. It is wonderful to be here with so many of you to celebrate Shabbat, to take a deep breath as we let this whole past week go, which is nice, take a break, and to, yes, exactly, and to have a wonderful introduction and welcome to this weekend, a Scholar in Residence weekend. It's Yom Limud on Sunday, and we have a wonderful scholar in residence here. You'll be hearing from him a little bit later, but first I think it's time to sing, it's time to pray, it's time to let the weekend go and to let Shabbat in. And what better way to do that than by lighting our Shabbat candles. So we rise for the lighting of the Shabbat candles.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kideshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner v'tzivanu lehadlik ner v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat. Amen.
You may be seated. As we welcome the Shabbat angels, turn to page 5, Shalom Aleichem.
Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech Malachei Amlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Bachem Shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech Malachei Amlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Baruch Hu. Shalom, Malachei Shalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech Malachei Amlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Tzedchem leShalom, Malachei Shalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech Malachei Amlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
Let us go and sing to Adonai. Let us trumpet praise to our protector. L'chun neranana, page 11.
L'chun neranana, l'chun neranana, l'chun neranana, l'Adonai. L'chun neranana, l'chun neranana, l'chun neranana, l'Adonai. Naria, naria, letzor ishenu, lekadmach fanav betoda. Naria, naria, letzor ishenu, izmirat naria lo. L'chun neranana, l'chun neranana, l'chun neranana, l'Adonai. L'chun neranana, l'chun neranana, l'chun neranana, l'Adonai.
The heavens shall be glad and the earth rejoice, the sea and its fullness roar. Yismechu HaShamayim, page 14.
Yismechu HaShamayim, Yismechu HaShamayim, Yismechu HaShamayim, Metagel Haaretz. Yismechu HaShamayim, ישמחו השמיים עד שמיים, ישמחו השמיים ותגל הארץ. ירם הים, ירם הים, ירם הים, ומלואו. ירם הים, ירם הים, ירם הים, ומלואו. ישמחו השמיים, ישמחו השמיים, ישמחו השמיים ותגל הארץ. ירם הים, ירם הים, ירם הים, ומלואו. ירם הים, ירם הים, ירם הים, ומלואו.
And now we imagine the Shabbat is like a bride, and we sing to her, we rejoice with her, and at the end we will stand and greet her as she comes in the room. Page 23, Lecha Dodi.
Lecha Dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabala. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabala. שמור וזכור בדיבור אחד, השמיענו אל המיוחד. אדוני אחד ושמו אחד לשם ולתפארת ולתהילה, ולתהילה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקבלה. לקראת שבת לכו ונלכה, כי מקור הברכה. מראש מקדם נסוכה, סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקבלה. We rise and face the Lord. לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקבלה. בואי ושלום נתנת בעלה, גם בשמחה ובצולה, תוך אמוני עם סגולה. בואי חלה, בואי חלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקבלה.
You may be seated. It is good to thank you, Adonai, and to sing your name most high. Tov lehodot, page 27.
טוב, טוב, טוב להודות, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולזמר, ולזמר, ולזמר לשמך עליון. טוב, טוב, טוב להודות, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולזמר, ולזמר, ולזמר לשמך עליון. להגיד בבוקר חסדך ואמונתך בלילות, עלי עשור ועלי נבל, עלי היגיון בכינור. טוב, טוב, טוב להודות, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולזמר, ולזמר, ולזמר לשמך עליון. טוב, טוב, טוב להודות, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולזמר, ולזמר, ולזמר לשמך עליון, ולזמר לשמך עליון. טוב, טוב להודות, טוב להודות לאדוני,
we take a moment, even in the midst of our rejoicing and gratitude for the week that we've had, the fact that it's over and all the joy we take with us into Shabbat, we take a moment to remember those among us who are having heavy hearts this evening, those who are in mourning. And to you we say, may God comfort you along with all the other mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. If you are currently in mourning or if you are observing a yard site, I invite you to turn to page 30 to rise and join me for the Mourner's Kaddish. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, be'alma divra kirotei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon v'yomechon u'b'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala v'izman kari v'imru amen, yehi shmei Rabbah mevorach le'alam almei almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei d'kudesha b'rechu, Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tush bechata v'nechemata, da'amiram be'alma v'imru amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'imrumav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. I invite everyone now to rise, turn to page 39 for the Barchu.
Baruch et Adonai hamevorach, Baruch Adonai hamevorach le'olam va'ed.
You may be seated as we turn to page 40 for Ahavat Olam.
Ahavat Olam Beit Yisrael, Beit Yisrael, Amecha Ahavta, Torah u'mitzvot, Chukim u'mishpatim, Chukim u'mishpatim, Otanu limatta, Al ken Adonai Eloheinu, B'shormeinu, B'shormeinu, Nasiach bechukecha b'torah beit Yisrael, Beit Yisrael amechavta, Torah u'mitzvot, chukim u'mishpatim, otanu limatta, v'nismach b'divrei Toratecha, ומצוותיך לעולם ועד, כי הם חיינו באורך ימינו, ובהם נגע יומם ולילה, ואהבתך, אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים, ברוך אתה Adonai, Ohei, Amo Yisrael. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. ובכל מאודך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבבך, ושיננתם לבניך, ודיברת בם, ושבתך בביתך, ובלכתך בדרך, ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך.
We continue silently with the paragraphs on page 42.
Adonai Elohechem Emet.
Who is like you, Adonai, among the mighty? Who is like you, adorned in holiness, revered in praise, working wonders? Michamocha, page 44.
Kamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh, nora, nora, nora tehilot, osei pele. Mi kamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh, nora, nora, nora tehilot, osei pele. Malchutcha ובניך בוקע ים לפני משה זה לי ענו ואמרו מלכותך ובניך בוקע ים לפני משה זה לי ענו בa'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh, nora, nora, nora tehilot, osei pele. Mi kamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh, nora, nora, nora tehilot, osei pele.
Allow us, Adonai our God, to sleep peacefully. Awaken us to life, O Sovereign. Hashkivenu, page 45.
Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom ve'amidenu malkeinu lechaim. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom ve'amidenu malkeinu lechaim. Ushmor tzeiteinu uloveinu lechaim ulshalom me'ata ve'ad
Vishamru, page 46.
ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם, אותי לעולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. וביום השביעי שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם.
We rise to Chatzi Kaddish.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, אמן. בעלמא דברך חילותי וימליך מלכותי. בחי יכול וביום יכול ובחי לכל בית ישראל. בגלה ובזמן הקריב וימרו אמן. בגלה ובזמן הקריב וימרו אמן, אמן. יהי שמי רבה מברך לעולם ולעלמי עלמיה. יתברך, יתברך וישתבח, ויתפאר ויתרומם, ויתנשא ויתהדר, ויתפלל ויתעלה. שמי דקודשה בריחו לעילם מכל ברכתה ושירתה. תושבחתה ונחמתה, תאמירן בעלמא ואמרו אמן, ואמרו אמן, ואמרו אמן, ואמרו אמן, אמן.
We turn to page 47, and we have a little bit of time with God, with the words in our prayer book, with the words in our heart for the silent Amidah, page 47.
turn to page 51 and join in Shalom Rav. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim le'olam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim le'olam. Ki atahu melech Aron l'kol hashalom. Ki atahu melech Aron l'kol hashalom. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim le'olam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim le'olam. V'tov be'einecha levarech et Amcha Yisrael b'chol עת ובכל שעה בשלומך. שלום רב על ישראל עמך תשים לעולם. שלום רב על ישראל עמך תשים לעולם. ברוך אתה אדוני המברך את עמו ישראל בשלום. And we invite you to put your arms around each other as we all join in Oseh Shalom. Oseh Shalom, Oseh Shalom bimromah, Uyaseh Shalom aleinu, Shalom aleinu, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael ve'imru Amen. Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael ve'imru Amen. Uyaseh Shalom aleinu, Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Uyaseh Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Your turn. Even louder. That's beautiful. Uyaseh Shalom aleinu, Shalom aleinu, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru Amen. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru Amen.
We remain standing as we take the opportunity as we're all together, either here or at home, to say a prayer for those who are in need of healing, a Misha Berach for the Cholim. So if there's anyone in your life that you want to say a Misha Berach for, I want you to hold that name in your heart real close now as we say the Misha Berach inside back cover.
May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the
You may be seated. So we turn to page 54, Kaddish Shalem.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, בלמדי ולחירותי ויעניק מלכותי, וחי יחון לגמכון וחי לכל בית ישראל, ועגלה בזמן קריב ויאמרו, אמן. יהי שמי רבם לברך, לעולם ולעלמי עלמיה, יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהלל ויתהלל ויתהלל, שמי נקודשה, בריחו לעילה מכל אחד בשירתה, תשבחתה ונחמתה, דמירן בעלמה ואמרו, אמן. יתקבל צלותון ובאותון לכל ישראל, קודם אבוהון דבשמיא ואמרו, אמן. יהי שלום הרבה מן שמיא וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו, אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו, אמן.
Now, just in case you're wondering, why is Rabbi Fort talking reading so many page numbers up there, and Rabbi Morgan sitting there, he looks perfectly fine. Well, I'll have you know, a horrible affliction has befallen Rabbi Morgan. The worst thing that could possibly happen to a rabbi, he's lost his voice. Which, I hope you said that, Misha Baruch, for him, because it's very hard for us to not be able to talk. So he's speaking up here, and he's reading page numbers in spirit. So thank God, though, it falls to me to be able to introduce Dr. Joshua Kulp, our scholar in residence. Our scholar in residence is generously sponsored by Marcia Terrell, and we are so grateful to her to bring Dr. Kulp to America and here to Beth Yeshurun specifically. Dr. Joshua Kulp is the Rosh Yeshiva, so he's the head of the conservative yeshiva in Jerusalem, Israel. He's been teaching Talmud and Halakha there for 25 years. He is also the author of 3 books, the Shechter Haggadah, Reconstructing the Talmud, Volume 1, and Reconstructing the Talmud, Volume 2. Dr. Kulp is the author of a complete English commentary on the Mishnah, which is created as a part of Mishnah Yomit. You can learn a little Mishnah every day. Freely available on Sefaria, so if you go online, you could learn a little bit of Mishnah with Dr. Kulp. He's working on Daf Shavui, which is an English translation and commentary on the Talmud. He's completed a commentary on Megillah, Sukkah, Avodah Zarah, Ketubot, Kiddushin, and most of Bava Kama. Why not all of it? He's lectured throughout North America on the Seder and Haggadah, other topics related to Talmud, Halakha. During the summers, Dr. Kulp runs the Beit Midrash at Camp Ramah in New England. He lives currently in Modi'in with his wife, 4 children. In his spare time, he is an avid triathlete and craft beer drinker, and fun fact, was the hardest teacher I ever had at the conservative yeshiva. Just so you know. You're welcome. So I hope he's a lot easier on you than he ever was on me. But I know no matter what, you are going to learn a lot, and it's going to be extremely interesting. So it is my great pleasure to introduce and welcome to our Bima, Dr. Joshua Kulp.
Thank you. She tells it like it is, huh? So it's great to be here. I just want to thank everyone who made this possible. With all that's been taken away from us in the last couple of years, I think that we're all especially grateful for times we can get together. I usually travel to the United States several times a year, speak at conservative synagogues all over the country, and this is my first trip since 2019. So I'm especially very happy to be here, and I'm grateful for your hospitality. And we're talking about one of my favorite subjects, which is food. And we all love to eat food, and Judaism is largely all about food. And tonight, we're going to look at some of the stories from Genesis, from the first book of the stories of the creation of the world. A lot of you are probably, when you think about some of the stories in the beginning of the Torah, it probably comes to mind questions sort of like, are these true? Are these history? Are we supposed to take them literally? What I want to look at tonight is some of these stories and think of them not as literal truth. I don't take these as historical facts, but as ways in which we sort of engage with the world, ways in which the author of these stories is trying to offer a story. It's literature. It's not philosophy. It's not about something. It's not someone telling you something. It's somebody telling you a story that helps you think about the world, think about the place, especially of what does it mean to be a human being? What does it mean to be part of the animal world and yet very different from the other animals? What does it mean in terms of our responsibility to each other and to nature? What does it mean in terms of our relationship with nature and our relationship with each other? And I want to show how that's done partly in the book, in the beginning, the very beginning, before we get to sort of a more historical, realistic, somewhat realistic sounding stories. We get, of course, the story that everybody's familiar with, the story of the creation of the world, and a lot of it is about food. And it helps us think about what it means, like what it means to be human beings who eat, and we need this sustenance and our relationship with food. So I want to look at some of these texts with you. We're going to look at them briefly. I hope it's going to be a while, right? We're only in February. It's going to be back till September, October before we get to some of these stories again. But I hope you'll file them away in your mind. And when you hit them again in the cycle of the Torah reading, you think a little bit about a different way of reading some of these stories. So the first story you have, I hope everybody has a piece of the text over here, is the sixth day of creation. Human beings and animals were created on the sixth day of creation. And I'll just read some of these verses with you. God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fertile and increase, fill the earth and master it, and rule the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, and all the living things that creep on earth." Human beings are at the top of that chain of beings in the stories of creation. We're the last things created. And then immediately God tells people what they're supposed to eat. God said, "See, I give you every seed-bearing plant that is upon all the earth, and every tree that has seed-bearing fruit. They shall be yours for food. And to all the animals on land, to all the birds of the sky, and to everything that creeps on earth, in which there is the breath of life, I give all the green plants for food," and it was so. So if you're reading these verses, right, you're human beings. Human beings are the only people who read or understand these verses. Animals don't. You probably immediately notice that the things that we eat and the things that we see animals eat is not exactly like the story. Right? We're telling ourselves the story that doesn't match the way people are today. People, as far as we can tell, for, I don't know, millions of years have been eating animals, and animals, I suppose, as long as animals have existed on this planet, they've been eating other animals. And we tell ourselves a story where human beings are supposed to eat plants and animals are supposed to eat plants, even though we know, again, I want to sort of hammer this point at home. Right? We know that this isn't true anymore. We don't live in such a world. We live in a world in which living creatures eat other living creatures, including ourselves. So why tell this story? What's the point in telling a story that doesn't explain the way we are now? So one of them is that I think that there's this ideal. Maybe it's unattainable now in the world in which we live, but there is this ideal of harmony. Harmony in which there's a world without violence. Right? Again, it doesn't mean that we can get there. Right? There's a difference between an ideal and something that we can achieve. Right? I don't think the Torah actually thinks that we can really, certainly animals can't, right? You're familiar maybe with this messianic vision of the lion laying down with a lamb. It comes up in the book of Isaiah. But we don't recognize that reality. If you told a lion to eat vegetarian, the lion would die. Lions can't, and many animals can't live without eating meat. But at least in the figment of our imagination, we imagine a harmonious world, right? It is possible, but it's not there. And that's something we have to recognize now, that there is this harmonious reality out there that we and the whole world has moved away from. And even if we can't get all the way there, right, we need to do things, including culture and religion and literature and other forms of culture that human beings have created to keep us in guard away from those extremely violent tendencies that human beings and animals can have, unfortunately, we know. So that's the first story. The first story, and it's important that it's illustrated through food. One of the main ways that we relate to the world is through food. Right? What can we eat? What do we eat? What do we allow ourselves to eat? What do we not allow ourselves to eat? It may be subconscious, but your diet, something you do many, many times a day, you eat, and it's something that you're maybe not thinking about all the time, but we probably should think about how we relate to the world through the food we eat. And I could go on about that for a very long time, but I'm going to move on to the next little story. The next story is, of course, involved with the first thing God tells people not to do. the very first thing God tells people not to do is not to eat from one of the trees, or from two of the trees, really. From the ground the Lord caused to grow, I'm reading the bottom of the page there, every tree that was pleasing to the sight and good for food, with the tree of life in the middle of the garden, the tree of knowledge of good and bad. The Lord God took the man and placed him in the Garden of Eden to till it and tend it. And the Lord commanded the man, saying, of every tree of the garden you are free to eat, but as for the tree of knowledge of good and bad, you must not eat of it, for as soon as you eat of it, you shall die. Right? And you know the story that people don't listen to that commandment. But it's interesting, the first thing that we're told not to do is to just hold back a little bit. Right? It's hard for human beings to hold back. If you think about food, right, food is especially hard to hold back. You know there are things you probably shouldn't eat. Your doctor might tell you, don't eat that. Right? Your spouse might tell you, please don't eat that so much. It's not healthy for you. And you do eat it because it's very, very difficult to restrain from eating. But that's one thing we learn in the story here, that there is this ideal. What does it mean to be a human being? Right? I don't think animals, right, other animals, can restrain themselves. Right? If you put, I don't know, if I told my dog that the meat wasn't good for him, and I put a piece of meat on the ground, 100% of the time, he will eat the piece of meat, right? If you have a dog or a cat or a pet at home, right? The cat or the dog or the pet cannot learn, unless they're, like, I guess, severely punished for it or trained, but they're not going to learn not to eat. And human beings, though, they can make decisions. We are capable of that, of making a decision not to eat something. But of course, right, we don't. We didn't make that decision. Adam, Eve, both make the decision to go against God's will and to eat from that tree. And it's something to think about, that we have this ideal of being able to restrain ourselves from doing things, but we're not so good at it. Now, the last part is probably the most famous part, and that is when people do eat from the tree. And I wanted to bring in a very interesting midrash about that story. So the verses read, God knows that as soon as you eat of it, your eyes will be open and you will be like divine beings who know good and bad. When the woman saw that the tree was good for eating and a delight to the eyes, which is interesting, it's visually pleasurable, right, which is something also unique, by the way, I think, to human beings, that we find things aesthetically pleasing. We're not just using them, but we like looking at them. And that the tree was desirable as a source of wisdom. She took of its fruit and ate. She also gave some to her husband, and he ate. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they perceived that they were naked. Very important verse there. And they sewed together fig leaves and made themselves loincloths. We're not going to talk about clothing too much, but that's also something that's very unique about human beings. We're the only animals that clothe ourselves. All other animals go around as they are. Now, as Americans living in a Christian world and in the Western world, if you close your eyes and you think of the tree, what do you see? 100% of you, I would imagine. What kind of tree is it? An apple, right? Everybody always thinks it's an apple, right? And it doesn't say that there in the Torah, and the rabbis aren't all that familiar. I don't even think they had apples, the rabbis in the 2nd century in the land of Israel or in Babylonia, and that's a Christian image that didn't come around till the Middle Ages. So the rabbis have a different debate about what kind of tree it was, but what they point out is very important, and I want to finish up with reading that. What was the tree from which Adam and Eve ate? And the question I think they're answering here is, what plant, what tree, what fruit brought them this idea of clothing, of sexuality, of their nakedness, wisdom, good and bad, knowledge of good and bad? What tree symbolizes that for us? And there are 4 suggestions we're going to read here. One of them, Rebbe Meir said, it was wheat from which we make bread. When a person lacks knowledge, people say that person has not eaten bread made from wheat even a day. So what does bread symbolize? Right? When you think about bread, I don't know about you, I love bread. Really love bread. But bread's incredible when you think about who made bread. We grind some stuff up from the ground, and we make this delicious, fluffy, tasty food that brings nutrition to us. It's an amazing creation. And what does it symbolize? It symbolizes culture, knowledge, our ability, our mastery over nature, our ability to take something that just simple raw food and turn it into an incredible, sophisticated creation. That's part of what this means to be a human being, to take nature and to do with it incredibly sophisticated things. And bread is one of those original inventions. The second opinion, a personal favorite of mine, Rabbi Yehuda, son of Eli, says it was a grapevine. As it says, the grapes for them are poison, a bitter growth their clusters. These clusters brought bitterness to the world. So what are grapes symbolic of? Grapes are, of course, symbolic of drunkenness, of drinking, something we're going to talk a little bit more about tomorrow night. And human beings, I think, are the only animals that search for this kind of mental escape. Right? And I'm not going to judge whether it's good or whether it's bad. It's just simply a fact that human beings have cultivated the plant world for all sorts of intoxicating beverages and substances, some of which are very bad for you and some of which are part of our culture and help us get away, interestingly, from the ability to distinguish between wrong and right. Right? When you're intoxicated, it becomes much more difficult. And that is part of what it means to be a human being. We have a burden of always feeling that we need to do the right thing. And sometimes that's burdensome for us, and we just want to escape it. We want to escape our responsibilities. And that's very much part also of what it means to be a human being. The last two opinions, I think, are also interesting. The third one was an etrogue. Right? They didn't have lemons and oranges. The only citrus, it's very hard to imagine, is an etrogue. But what does an etrogue symbolize? Well, elsewhere in the Torah, the etrogue is called Pri Eitz Hadar, a beautiful plant. And human beings, as I said before, have the ability to express, to acknowledge beauty in the world, aesthetics. Etrogue isn't just good for eating. Actually, it's not so good for eating, right? But it is pretty and it smells good. And that's something also that's unique to human beings. And the final one is it was a fig tree, which matches up with what they make the clothes out of, which is, again, part of what it means to be a human being. We hide our sexuality under clothing. We live in multiple climates, right? You've got Houston. I just came from Boston, which is a lot colder. And we really, human beings, have spread out and lived pretty much throughout the entire world, largely due to our ability to make clothing and keep ourselves warm enough in places that are not all that hospitable to less clothing. So I'm going to stop here, but I hope you've seen a little bit of some of the richness of these stories. I've taught these stories to many people, talking about companionship and loneliness and our relationship with the animals in other kinds of ways. There are endlessly rich things in these stories, and to be honest with you, that's often the time, that's how I think of Judaism in general. Judaism is like a symbolic way of thinking that gets us to think about what does it mean to be a human being? What does it mean to be a parent, a child, a brother, a sister, a member of a community? The mitzvot, the commandments, the texts, the stories that we tell ourselves are part of our culture, and it helps us understand better. It helps me understand better of how we live in this world. And I hope that in the next couple times that we learn together, you'll come hear me talk tomorrow and tomorrow night, and we can talk more about some of these issues. So again, thank you for having me. It's really great to be back here and to speaking to people. And I look forward to spending Shabbat with everybody. Thanks, everybody.
Just kidding, we're good. Yasher Koach to Dr. Kulp. He was much nicer to you than he ever was to me. And if I knew you could teach things like that, I would have not skipped as much class. If you would like to learn further with Dr. Kulp, and you do see it is such a pleasure, I do urge you to come or to tune in tomorrow afternoon or to come by tomorrow night to continue to learn from our scholar in residence. And again, a huge thank you to Marcia Terrell for making all of this possible. We turn now in our Siddur to page 56, and we rise for Aleinu.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצא בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי ארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם. אנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא שהונת שמיים ויסד הארץ ומשב יקרו בשמיים ממעל ושכינתו זו בגובה מרומים הוא אלוהינו אין עוד אמת מלכנו אפס זולתו ככתוב בתורתו וידעת היום והשגות בלבביך כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ימעל ועל הארץ עד אין עוד ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו
You may be seated. Tonight, the congregation Beth Yeshurun, we extend our condolences to the families of Doris Perlberg, Steve Sletkin, Marlene Lavich Tanner, Robin Marlene Deitch, and Earl J. Schneider. If you are currently in mourning or if you are observing a yard site, I invite you to turn to page 58 and join me for the Mourner's Kaddish. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah, be'alma divrach kirotei v'amlich malchutei, b'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'b'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala v'izman kari v'imru, amen. Yehi shmei rabba mevorach le'olam almei almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitale v'yitalal shmei dekudesha brichu, le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tush bechata v'nechemata, Da'amiram be'alma v'imru, amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru, amen. Oseh shalom b'imrumav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru, amen. You may be seated, and may all of our loved ones' memories be for a blessing. We do not have any anniversaries to announce tonight. Just as a reminder to everyone here, the following services, there will be oneg served in the Sukkah courtyard, which is very exciting. Huge thank you. If you did not notice that the cantor seemed like his hands had nothing to do tonight. Nothing to do tonight. And that is because we have a huge thank you debt to pay to Julie Sachs, all over on piano. Thank you so much, Julie, for playing piano for us tonight. You did a wonderful job, and it's wonderful to see you. And coming up, we have lots of wonderful things. Namely, of course, most immediately, you can continue to learn with Dr. Joshua Kulp, who is the head of the conservative yeshiva, which I don't even hesitate to say is the crown jewel in the conservative movement. And if you ever have a chance to learn there, no matter your age, I really hope you do take advantage. It's a wonderful jewel. Doesn't matter how small it is. It is small but mighty, and I am a huge fan of the conservative yeshiva. You can continue to learn with Dr. Kulp. Tomorrow, he'll be covering the very Jewish topic of bacon, cheeseburgers, and wine, the origins and enduring meaning of Jewish food prohibitions. So that sounds extremely fascinating. And tomorrow night, because craft beer is a huge passion, besides the text, craft beer is a huge passion of Dr. Kulp, so he'll be teaching tomorrow night the Torah of beer. Can you do Kiddush or Havdalah over beer and enjoy some craft beers here at Beth Yeshurun? On Sunday is Yom Limud. It's virtual this year. You can continue to learn from Dr. Kulp and the other wonderful teachers and speakers, including, if his voice is back, Rabbi Morgan, Rabbi Rosen will be teaching. It's going to be a wonderful Yom Limud, virtual this year. If you want to learn with me, we've got Stuff You Never Learned in Hebrew School, my monthly Zoom class on Thursday. I'm happy to say this out loud. Our topic for Zoom this month is sex work. Ancient Judaism's approach to sex work is definitely not what you'd think it is. There are some very conflicting views found in the Torah and later the rabbis in the Talmud. We have a very interesting and I would say realistic approach to human sexuality. So if you'd like to learn something you never learned in Hebrew school, which is namely Judaism and sex work, I urge you to tune into my Zoom class. Register online for that. That's Thursday, the 24th at 7 p.m. And of course, the rodeo is back, finally. Yes, clap for that. And so, of course, next Friday, February 25th, is citywide Go Texan Day. So obviously, it's going to be Go Texan Shabbat. But they don't have that in Israel. So wear your Texan gear, your cowboy gear that day. And that night, feel free to come to Shul in your cowboy attire. Boots, they're not required, but, if you got them, you should wear them. And join us for a Western-themed Onig afterwards. Next Friday is Go Texan Shabbat. And, of course, the legacy of Cantor Finkelstein, his concert, is coming up. I believe there might still be some tickets. There are actually still some tickets left, but they are going very fast. The concert is March 31st, so I really urge you to go to our website and get your ticket. You can hear our wonderful cantor, and there'll be cantors from across the globe who will be performing Cantor Finkelstein's original composition. So that event will sell out. I really urge you to go to our website to get your tickets for that, to get information about the other programs coming up, to register for my very interesting and risque Zoom class, and to get all of your other Beth Yeshurun information. And I think that's it for announcements. Yeah, we're good? We keep this train running on time when I'm up here. Before we have the Kiddush, do we have any children? Someone here must be here with their children. There's somebody, yes, children. Adult children count too. So if you are here, if you have your children, if you're joining us virtually, we'll have an opportunity to say a blessing over our children. So if you have a daughter, even if your daughter's grown up and she's with you, it still counts. So over our daughters, we say, Yisimech Elohim ke Sarah Rivka Rachel v'Leah. May God bless you and make you like Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. If you're here with your son, no matter how old or young they are, whether you're virtual or in person, over all of our sons, we would say, Yisimcha Elohim ke Ephraim and Menashe. May God bless you and make you like Ephraim and Menashe. And over all of our children, or just if you're here with your family, big family hug, because everyone needs more blessings. Over all of our families, we'll say, May God grant you the most precious of blessings, that of peace, and let us all say, Amen. We turn to page 55, rise for the Kiddush.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu v'shabbat kodsho b'yahava uvratzon hinchilanu zikaron l'maaseh bereshit ki hu yom techila lemikraei kodesh zecher letziat Mitzrayim kivanu v'acharta ve'otanu kidashta mikol ha'arim v'shabbat kodshecha be'ahava u'b'ratzon hinchaltanu Baruch atah Adonai Mekadesh HaShabbat. Let's all join in. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom.